very impressed by the solidarity of the international community. Until today, 21 countries have, together with the United Nations, development banks, bilateral agencies, charitable societies, they have provided humanitarian funding, emergency teams, in-kind support, logistics services, and other type of support. And this is really an extraordinary show of solidarity towards Sri Lanka, but also demonstrates all the work and the depth of the relationships that Sri Lanka has built around the world, and that has built that over the years. Now, the humanitarian community, the United Nations, together with all of our humanitarian partners, we have also been very active from day one. We have been on the ground from day one, supporting the national authorities, supporting the DMC, supporting the local authorities in responding to the disaster. From day one, we have delivered thousands of emergency food supplies and meals, non-food items, safe water, sanitation, and water purification, maternity and dignity kits, and we have supported urgent critical needs assessments, logistical solutions, and protecting services. In parallel, I'm also very happy that the United Nations Emergency Response Fund, the Central Emergency Response Fund, which is our global fund to respond to disasters, has approved an emergency allocation of $4.5 million to support emergency needs here in Sri Lanka. I have also had the pleasure, we have also deployed an emergency team in my office to support the authorities and support the humanitarian country team in responding to this disaster. And this includes experts from member states, but also staff of the United Nations that have come together. And other things that I need, there's been a number of these structures of support, some of them that we don't always, that we kind of take for granted. For example, the United Nations, UNOSAT, has activated what is called the Space Charter that has allowed the DMC to capture images from all sorts of satellites from different countries to be used for information management and tracking the impact. So, frankly, we've seen a very important deployment of international solidarity. But I think many of you who have been on the ground, who have seen the impact of the disaster, know that this is not over. Despite the fact that we are now 2 weeks after the disaster, still enormous amount of work remains to be done to fulfill the immediate needs of the population. Many thousands of people remain displaced, living in emergency centers. Many people have not been able to return to their houses. Many people require food and health and sanitation services. So I guess one of my key messages to all of you today is that while it's very important for us to be thinking today, of course, about future rebuilding and recovery, we need to start thinking about that today. What is most important now is to respond to these emergency and humanitarian needs of so many Sri Lankans across the country. That is the priority. And so the United Nations has activated the humanitarian country team, which together with the UN agencies and its local partners are working across 7 sectors: health, education, water, early recovery, shelter, etc. So we're working organized around 7 sectors to support the authorities and respond to this emergency. Very importantly, we are doing so as a result of a specific request by the government of Sri Lanka. The government of Sri Lanka has formally requested the United Nations and international organizations to support multi-sectoral international assistance in areas such as food security, livelihoods, agriculture, nutrition, education, water, sanitation, shelter, and early recovery. So we're responding to a request from the government. As part of this response, we have now put together a humanitarian priorities plan that we are launching today. This humanitarian priorities plan responds directly to a needs assessment that we have carried out together with the DMC. That was published last week, and we're going to do a second phase of that assessment, understanding in detail the emergency needs of the population. And we have put together this priorities plan, which seeks to mobilize $35 million over the next 4 months. So $35 million over the next 4 months in these 7 priority sectors. Yes? And this aid, this support, will be delivered or should be delivered by the United Nations together with our international and local partners as a complement to government support. Yes? Obviously, it's the government who is here leading the response efforts, but the government cannot cover all the needs. And especially, some of the support that the government will be rolling out, the allowances to clean your house, the allowances to cover for the rent, will need time to be rolled out, will need time to be implemented. And so this is where the United Nations and our partners were stepping in that period that we evaluate to be between 3 and 4 months to cover the areas that the government is not covering fully. This includes not only areas, sectors, but it also includes geographical areas where maybe the government doesn't have as much access, or areas or people that are most vulnerable. Yes, certain governmental programs, for example, will cover people, for example, that have a registered farm. As you saw, some of the allowances that were announced will go to farmers who have a registered farm. And so what do you do for those who only have 1 or 2 heads of cattle and don't have a registered farm? So the United Nations will be able to step into those gaps and fill those gaps in support of the authorities. And so I'm very happy to say that until now, the United Nations has received support from Australia, Canada, the European Union, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States that go towards this emergency, towards this humanitarian priorities plan. And so until now, together with the funding that the United Nations has mobilized from its own resources, we have more or less $9.5 million that we have received until now, and we are now seeking to mobilize the remaining $26 million to be able to cover the gap. And this is what today we have launched. And so we are appealing to the international community, we are appealing to our member states to support Sri Lanka in this time of need and to support the humanitarian country team in responding to this disaster. And so this is what we have done today, and we're very glad to have been able to do this relatively quickly, thanks to our partnerships and thanks to the collaboration with national authorities. So that's what I wanted to tell you, at least as an introduction, and I would be very happy to answer any questions or inquiries about this humanitarian priorities plan. Thank you very much.
One question. So about these funds that is coming to UN, about the funds that is coming to the UN, is there any sort of mechanism that is in place to ensure that this will reach individuals that actually need it the most?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think this is very important. And you know, we have a lot of experience, obviously, on humanitarian response across the world, and that's why we have an expert team here of our office for the coordination of humanitarian affairs. But more importantly, we have been working with the government of Sri Lanka for many decades, and so the targeting or the focusing of the support that the United Nations will be delivering is based on a very thorough needs assessment that we have carried out with the authorities. And there's not multiple needs assessment. There's one needs assessment that was published by the Disaster Management Center that we're focusing our attention with. So it is a conversation together with the different sectors. We have a conversation, for example, with the Minister of Health to understand where is it that you can reach people, where is it that you need support, where are the gaps, and that's where my colleagues from the health sector, led by WHO and Sarvodia, they come and fill the gap that the Ministry of Health cannot fill. So this is the way we work here in Sri Lanka, that's the way we work everywhere. There's a quite thorough methodology to make sure that we're targeting the right people and the people that are in need. But very importantly, we're talking here about life-saving emergency support. Yes? This is not about repairing the well, or yes, this is about people having clean water for the next few weeks and months while the well is repaired. This is about reestablishing emergency education, yes, while the school, we think that about 1,000 schools have been hit. So this will take time to repair those schools. What do we do with those kids in the meantime? This is the kind of emergency support that we are here to give. So this support is for 4 months, 3-4 months. This is really in the short term to make sure that people stay alive, stay healthy, and are able to recover in the medium to long term. And this is very, very important because we know by experience that if we delay this kind of humanitarian support, you know, people will be more vulnerable to diseases. Kids' education will be delayed. And so catching up afterwards will be even more expensive and will be more difficult for the authorities. So that's why for us it's so important to be acting today and to be responding today.
What about the land and housing crisis?
You mean the broader land and housing crisis, or the one that has been caused by the disaster?
Yeah.
The one caused by the disaster. Well, there's a lot to do. I think at the moment, for us, what is the most important, and this is at the center of our shelter group's work, is to make sure that every person that doesn't have a roof over its head has one. Yes? People have been using emergency centers until now. Some people have returned, yes, but for those people whose houses have been completely destroyed, many of them, the government needs to find a new location. Some of them were living in areas that were not legal areas and need to find a location, and so this will take time. So the priority for us at the moment is not to resolve the entire housing and land issues of Sri Lanka. This will take time. The priority right now is to make sure that the thousands of people that do not have a home have a roof over their shoulder, that while the government is finding medium to long-term solution, they have a roof and they are protected, and I think that's the most important at the moment.
So to further clarify, this assessment is separate to what the World Bank is also set to do, and you also mentioned that Sri Lanka is in a financial crisis also. This 35 million, is this in grant funds or is it more debt that the country can't afford to pay?
That's a very good question. So first of all, the funding that we are requesting, which is $35 million, we don't have it yet. We hope to mobilize it. The more or less, let's say, 10 million that we have and that we have received until now, including from the United Nations, this is grant funding. And all of the 35 that we are requesting is grant funding. So this is in no way going to add to the burden, the debt burden in the country. As a matter of fact, of course, one of the aspects that we are advocating for is, of course, for much more grant funding to Sri Lanka. Yes, Sri Lanka, at a moment where you are already under great debt distress, it's very difficult for Sri Lanka to take even more debt. So certainly we are encouraging countries and partners to provide grant funding, especially at the moment. But for humanitarian emergencies, the great majority of funding is grant. Now, on your question of assessments, what we are talking today is humanitarian, immediate, life-saving assistance based on a humanitarian assessment and a set of priority needs that we have done together with the DMC. This is very different, indeed, than the recovery and rebuilding assessment that the government is leading, yes, and that will that will understand better the damages that the cyclone has caused on infrastructure, on livelihoods, on industry, and the impact that it has had on families in the medium to long term. That assessment, the conversations have started by the government, and of course the World Bank will be supporting, I understand, but also other actors such as the United Nations, perhaps the Asia Development Bank, the European Union. All of these institutions will need to come together to support the government in this medium to long-term assessment. But this is very different than what we're talking today, which is immediate humanitarian support to cover immediate needs for the country.
The 35 million that you're talking about, that's for 4 months. Is there sort of a contingency to maybe you might have to extend it for a year or so? I mean, is there another plan for that?
So, no. In a sense that typically humanitarian aid is life-saving. Yes, so we are really focusing in preserving life, meaning that the focus of humanitarian help is what will happen in the short term to maintain people's lives. And that means that whatever is needed beyond that, yes, and of course, it's not always 4 months. It can be 4, 5 months, 6 months. In this case, we have taken a decision that more or less the span of time that was going to be needed is about 4 months. But beyond that, the regular mechanisms of the country need to kick in. Yes, the recovery, the rebuilding, and other mechanisms that the government and the international community has needs to come in and support. Not humanitarian assistance. So we might adjust the plan as we go forward. So at the moment, there's a great focus, for example, on food, on agriculture, on water and sanitation, and on shelter. Yes? But as the needs might evolve, we might adjust the plan a little bit, but we intend to close that phase in about 4 months. Yes? And I think this is in line with the way the United Nations have been engaging in other humanitarian disasters, but also the way we work globally.
Just as there are other assessments, there are other funds also being set up, including by the government with the private sector. So when you say these are grants, who are you reaching out to for this 35 million? And besides this briefing, how else will you try to reach out?
Yeah, so the fund, for example, that you mentioned, that fund has been really set up, I understand, for recovery and rebuilding. So more for the medium to long-term needs of the country, which is fantastic. And I must say, it's really hard, you know, it's very heartening to see this level of solidarity by individuals, the private sector, that come together. But this appeal, yes, that we are making today for the most immediate needs, at the moment, it's essentially countries that have contributed to it. The countries that I have listed, but also the United Nations. But we are doing a great effort in the next few days to appeal to a very broad array of actors. Of course, we want to appeal to the generosity of countries to give beyond what they have already given. And I think the extent of the disaster justifies, we think, a lot more generosity with Sri Lanka. And so we hope that countries will come together to provide additional help to the help that they have given already. But we are also appealing to the private sector, to individuals, to provide funding. So we are also open to both private and individual donations to contribute to this humanitarian effort.
There's disasters of this scale, as you mentioned, elsewhere in the region also. So how does Sri Lanka set itself apart to get these funds? Because there's huge damage in Indonesia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka region.
And I think this is one of the central challenges for the United Nations at the moment. I don't think there's been at least I've been working for the United Nations for almost 30 years. I can't remember a time where we've had so many emergencies at the same time. This is not only the recent weather-related emergencies here in the region, but also very serious emergencies around the world, in Sudan, in Gaza, in Yemen. And so the humanitarian system is under enormous strain. And so, of course, this doesn't make our work easier, and it doesn't make it easy for Sri Lanka to mobilize this kind of humanitarian help. And so my job is to do everything I can to stand side by side the government and the people to try to mobilize and advocate for Sri Lanka. What I can tell you is that we need to look at population that is affected. And Sri Lanka has been particularly affected with about 2.2 million people. So compared to the populations of other Asian countries, the percentage or the proportion of people affected in Sri Lanka has been very high. The other thing I would say is that the damage that has been caused in Sri Lanka is also quite complex. You know, lowlands have been affected by floods, yes, while the highlands by a lot of landslides. This also doesn't make the response easy, because that means that our response needs to be very tailor-made and very multi-sectoral, which makes this type of response very difficult.
Do you have any sort of this, I mean, you've done this for 4 months and you mentioned all the justification for that. At least we have any guess on how much it will require for 1 year, kind of medium term estimate of what it will require?
No, I think the short answer is we do not know this yet. We are working very closely now with the government to figure this out. But I can tell you, UNDP just published, as you saw, and we would be happy to share it with you, just an initial sense of damage. The damage is extensive. You know, when you say that 30% of the rail network is inoperative, you have many thousands of kilometers of roads that have been affected and damaged, 1,000 schools. So we don't know yet what is the number, and we don't know how much it will cost to recover and rebuild. And remember that the impact is not only on infrastructure. The impact is on small and medium enterprises. The impact is on farmers. This is at the beginning of the planting season for the recent planting season. The impact is on farmers. So the impact is going to be extensive. That we know. How much? We don't know yet. This is the work that the government has now started, and we are going to work together with the World Bank, the ADB, and other international partners at figuring that out. And also, I can tell you that you have my commitment and the commitment of the United Nations to do everything we can to accompany Sri Lanka in the recovery and rebuilding phase. But at the moment, we're really focused on the immediate needs and on the emergency life-saving needs that this country requires.
In terms of this plan, what are the immediate humanitarian priorities? How is this plan implemented?
So, as I was saying, the priorities are in 7 sectors. Yes. So, and we will be sharing with you those 7 sectors. But I have the 7 sectors here. The needs include food security. Yes. So food distribution for the people that need it. It includes agricultural support, especially cash grants for smallholder farmers that have lost how do you say in English? I don't know the word in English. Their crops, thank you. For farmers that have lost their crops. It includes water and sanitation. It includes education, health, including mental health. It includes shelter, as I was mentioning before, but it also includes debris and garbage removal. So, and finally, protection. So protection for the most vulnerable people, especially children. Yes? So these are the emergency sectors that the plan is addressing. Of course, in each of those sectors, the people in need is different. Yes? So, for example, we have a lot more people in need in food and agriculture than in education. So, the needs and the financing is different depending of the sector, and we will be sharing with you the detail of the plan.
How should Sri Lanka proceed with a resettlement?
Well, you know, this differs quite a bit from area to area, and it depends a lot of the type of impact that it has had. In certain cases, and this is rightly the focus of the authorities, it's to help people who own their houses to clean or to rebuild the houses that they have. I think the more complicated response is where people that were affected, for example, in the shores of the rivers, yes, where people had settled illegally. There's a lot of illegal settlements. And here it's very important, and the government is very conscious of this, it's very important that those people do not go back and resettle at the same old place, because we are going to be in the same situation at the next disaster. So here it's very important that the government finds a solution, either by relocating them to government land or finding other type of solution through the housing ministry for these people. So I think that's very important. Then there's also the situation that is particular more in the hills, in the uphill country, which is landslides, where there it has affected a lot of houses, a lot of access roads have been blocked and destroyed. So there again, the solutions will be very different, but you will need to focus on a lot of debris and a lot of reopening of roads for people to have access back to their houses. So the situation is quite complex and depends very much on the local situation.
So these sorts of weather-related things are getting more common, more extensive. You said, there's donor fatigue. How does the world gear up to this sort of thing going forward?
Yeah, well, I would say that the world is not very well prepared for this, both because we are seeing a reduction of financing for humanitarian response, because countries are having other priorities. We are seeing, and of course, I haven't seen any analysis or report on this specific disaster. And so I don't want to say that this specific disaster has been caused by climate change. But I can tell you that clearly around the world, we are seeing more and more extreme weather events, including cyclones, floods. And so it is clear that in the next years, in the next decades, the world is going to suffer a lot more of these disasters, and we are not prepared. The countries are not prepared, but the international community is not prepared for this kind of cost. And so we are advocating not only to build back better, but to build back in a way that is climate resilient. For example, that's why it's so important that the government today does not resettle, does not allow people to resettle in areas that are vulnerable to flooding. Yes? And that we build the kind of protection on the sides of the Kelaniya River, in the sides of the hundreds of rivers in Sri Lanka, so people are protected from future flooding. We need to make those investments today to be able to save money later, so we have that money for other things that are quite priority for the country. So that, I think, is clear here in Sri Lanka, but really it's the reality all over the world today, that you're in New York, in Delhi, in Bangkok. This is a priority. How do you invest to protect for future climate disaster? How do you invest in a climate smart way? Yeah.
If anyone has any questions in Sinhala or Tamil, we can translate for the resident coordinator.
Please. Use the microphone just for the benefit of our colleagues. Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the funding that the United Nations receives is delivered in very different ways. It really depends on what is being done. In certain cases, for example, the United Nations purchases the food, yes, and gives it to the government to distribute it. Yes, for example. In other cases, we might work with government to provide some funding that they will distribute as cash grants. Yes? In other cases, we will work with civil society, local civil society, that will be the one purchasing and distributing non-food items, for example, for people to clean up their houses. So it really depends what is needed. But what I can assure you is that all of the work that the United Nations does in Sri Lanka, we're doing it very closely with the government, very much in coordination with the government. And for us, it's extremely important that what we're doing is complementary to the government efforts and is done hand in hand with the government. So sometimes we work through the government, sometimes through civil society, and sometimes the United Nations will spend it directly. Yes? So it really depends what we're talking about. If it's shelter, if it's, if it's tents, if it's food, if it's water and sanitation, it really depends. But what I can assure you is we're doing it very closely, and what we focus on is life-saving. So we will do it the best way possible to deliver the fastest way possible the support. Because when you are in a humanitarian crisis, when you are in a humanitarian situation, speed and delivery is the most important. So that's what counts, and that's the criteria by which we hope to be measured, that our success needs to be measured, and I hope that you will measure our success in terms of delivery. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that people should not be settled in areas to flood, but Sri Lanka is a wet country, it's a tropical country, floods all the time.
Yes.
What are the options for making these areas flood resistant? Because many communities live in it's not flood in some other areas. So if you try to take people out, uproot them, you're going to you might see some other areas where some other disaster. So if you have seen countries like, for example, Holland and so on, there are all kinds of techniques, and there are also early warning emergency. Instead of just uprooting people and making this, taking them away from their traditional land, if someone can have the need for that, methods of coping instead of taking people out.
Yeah. Well, floods will continue. Absolutely. And disasters such as this one will occur again. And obviously, there's not one solution. There's not one silver bullet. I think we need to use all the tools at the disposal of the government to find a multiplicity of solutions. Some people, and I can tell you that when I visit some of those communities, they know where the water is going to come. They've known forever. They know that they shouldn't be settling houses in these areas. So in certain cases, people should not be living there, period. Yes? Because the vulnerability is too high. In other areas, it's about protection. Yes? It's about mitigating the impact. So, and in other ways, in other areas, the solutions are going to be different. So I guess the short answer to that is that we need to use all of those solutions. But sometimes, yes, indeed, people have to be moved, and we should make sure that we don't build in those areas. And this is not only for Sri Lanka. It's the same in my country and in every country in the world. We know which areas are the most prone to flooding or to disaster, and we shouldn't be building there. But of course, this is not the solution for everybody who's in every zone. There are grades of risk, and we need to do the right type of solution depending on the level of risk. Yes?
There are two questions asked. First one is, do other countries get the relief in a similar way that the Sri Lankans get? And second one is, do you think the relief distributed reached the people?
So, absolutely. So just in the recent, yesterday, Myanmar did also a humanitarian appeal. It's not only related to the weather event. It's related to a very complex humanitarian situation, but they have also, Vietnam has also done recently a humanitarian appeal and has received also funding from the United Nations Central Emergency Fund. So many, Cuba recently has also suffered from the impact of a cyclone and has received international support. So many countries around the world are in a similar situation, which is why it makes the appeal of Sri Lanka even more challenging, because you're not the only one facing this kind of disaster. So that's for the first question. And how do we make sure that the aid is reaching? Well, there's different, I guess the simple way is that we have pretty strong monitoring mechanism, yes? But at the same time, we work very closely with the communities. And so Sri Lanka is a tightly knit place. So information travels very quickly, thanks to you, yes? So you play a big role in this. So there's a lot of work a lot of efforts that are invested together with the government to make sure that we're monitoring the distribution of this. We also have community feedback mechanisms that are integrated in the way we work. So where people in communities can call and put in complaints, and we are pretty responsive to that. And again, this is not only for the United Nations, but it's across the humanitarian community working with local partners. And I must say, in Sri Lanka, we couldn't be doing the work we're doing without the very rich network of civil society organizations that exist across the island. And so they are the ones who know who are the beneficiaries. They're the ones who know the people. I was very recently with a community, and I met the district administration, and I was very impressed by the local Gramin Nidari, yes, official who knew that each one of the families that lived in their area. And so I was there to witness, to observe the distribution of items to clean the houses. Well, frankly, the local official, she knew every single family that lived in this area and was able to certify that the aid. So we are working very closely with local authorities who know the people, very closely with local organizations that know people, and so this is also how we make sure that the aid gets there. Again, this is not the United Nations coming into a white helicopter and dropping food. Yes, this is the United Nations working very closely with Sri Lankans, with Sri Lankan authorities, and this is the way we do it in Sri Lanka. This is the way we do it everywhere around the world. That's how we can make our work meaningful and impactful.
Apart from the efforts that have been taken now, will there be anything taken in the future to make sure that we prevent such an impact being caused by disasters like this?
Well, this is an excellent question, and this is the kind of conversation that We are engaged now with the government. We have been engaged with the government for many decades on ways for the government, for the authorities to make investments more climate resilient, more disaster resilient. So obviously there's a lot more to be done. Obviously this costs a lot of money. Obviously it's not easy to do when you are defaulting on your debt. Obviously this is not easy to do when you are suffering an economic crisis. So this is why it's so important that we recover fast and that we continue investing in these very important infrastructure and livelihoods that are climate and disaster resilient. Yeah. Thank you so much. Bohome Stuti, Mika Nandri. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahamrid. Thank you everyone for coming. We are hoping to email the 7 priority areas.
This is another Derana live event.